and welcome to session 2. We hope you've had some good conversations since last time. That conversation Nikki and I had last time was a real eye-opener. I had no idea he felt like that when I gave him directions in the car. We're going to be looking at a central aspect of marriage, commitment, and how we put it into practice in our relationship.
There's a romantic myth about that marriage only works if we marry the perfect person. A bachelor asked a computer to find him the perfect partner. He wrote, "I want a companion who is small and attractive, loves water sports and enjoys group activities." The computer answered, "Marry a penguin."
Of course, we must choose carefully and wisely, but marriage is about more than compatibility. This session, we'll be interviewing Jonathan Andrea later, and we'll be hearing from our sofa couples throughout the session about the role of commitment. First, though, we want to ask the question, why is marriage in such trouble today?
Wedding dress trends have definitely changed over the decades, but now it seems marriage itself, for centuries the norm in society, is going out of fashion. So why are so many people turning their backs on marriage, and why do 40% of marriages end in divorce?
People like freedom. We're living in a society where people want to be free.
Because our society's changed, I think people are settling down a lot later, they're travelling.
I think it's just old-fashioned, really. I think it's something that was done a long time ago. It's not generally done now. A lot of people are more happy with just being in a relationship.
It's still important, but not perhaps as important as it once was.
I'm from divorced parents, and I don't believe in marriage, actually.
I think a lot of people have turned their backs on marriage because they've seen their parents and the generation of the 60s and 70s divorcing in ever larger numbers. And the real tragedy is that they've got something that really doesn't work nearly as well as marriage. People who stay unmarried are roughly 5 times more likely to split up than their married counterparts in the first 5 years of a baby's life. And that is hugely destructive for a whole new generation of children.
We live in a consumer society. You only need to walk down your high street or turn on your TV to see that we are bombarded by advertisers telling us what we need to be happy and satisfied. We've never had so much choice. I've counted over 40 choices of toothpaste in this pharmacy, and if you don't like what you've bought, you can just throw it away and buy another variety or brand. But it's this throwaway mentality that some experts believe is producing throwaway marriages.
We live in a very throwaway consumer society today. We think short term, we don't think long term. And there is a lack of commitment in our attitudes and in our actions. And I do believe that that does affect the way we see relationships and the way that we see marriage.
But while more couples choose to live together than wed, evidence suggests that marriage is still the best option. Researchers have found that on average, married couples are more likely to stay together, have better physical and mental health, are wealthier, more productive, and have better sex lives than those who cohabit. Perhaps if that message was driven home more, then more of us will be rushing out to buy one of these and signing up for lifelong commitment.
The earliest description of marriage that we possess comes at the very beginning of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh."
Marriage is portrayed as a vital part of God's design for human society, in whatever culture. It's presented as having 2 purposes, for friendship and for family life.
First, let's look at friendship. Marriage is part of God's provision to meet our most fundamental needs.
The first crisis to face mankind was aloneness. When God created the land, the plants, the fish, the birds, and so on, he said each time, "It is good." Then, in Genesis chapter 2, God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone." And so he created Eve.
When Adam is presented with his new wife, Eve, he says spontaneously these words of deep identification. "Here at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." We were clearly created for relationship, we identify with, and we need each other. Of course, marriage isn't the only way to counter aloneness, but it is the closest of all human relationships.
Even at the end of a really hard day, just knowing that there's somebody there who can give you a cuddle and tell you that it's going to be all right. Having this constant friend that is always going to be there, definitely.
I know for me, I've got quite a stressful job, and even when I'm going through a particular problem at work, I'll perhaps, the thought will come into my mind about Rosie, and I'll know that I'll go home to Rosie and we can talk about it and we can console one another.
Yeah. So,
that's quite something to look forward to.
The word used in the original Hebrew to describe the man being united to his wife is a very strong word used for joining things or people together in such a way that they can't easily be separated again.
Perhaps the best visual aid of a marriage is to take two pieces of paper and to glue them together. You create, in effect, one new piece of paper with two sides.
It's that joining that meets our longing for relationship. That's why marriage can bring such joy. But it also explains why, if a married couple is torn apart, it brings such pain.
And if I was to take two pieces of paper that had been stuck together and was to try to separate them, I wouldn't be able to do so without causing great damage to both parts.
When a marriage breaks up, it's not two independent people who divide from each other, but two made one.
I've helped out a lot on people going through separation and divorce, and I've seen in every instance there is always pain and hurt, and it's sometimes the most enormous pain and hurt you could ever imagine. I've never seen a painless separation or divorce. It takes years for people to get over it, sometimes 20 years, especially if you've got children. The hurt that you feel, the hurt that your relationships feel, it goes right to your heart, right to your self-confidence. You go through anger, hurt, pain, shame, rejection, low self-confidence, all the feelings you can have, you go through. And it's really difficult to recover from it, but people do.
That's why Jesus said, "What God has joined together, let no one separate." Marriage is part of God's design for society, and its first purpose is for friendship. Marriage meets our need, indeed our craving for intimacy.
The second purpose of marriage is for family life. Marriage is the foundation of family life. I don't know if you've ever thought at any length about the fact that God decided it would take a man and a woman through the most intimate act of which human beings are capable, lovemaking, to produce a child.
Well, we know you didn't come on marriage preparation to learn that. I don't know if you've heard the story of the young boy who was asked to write an essay on his family history. When he got home, he decided to do some research. He approached his mother and asked her, "Mum, where did I come from?" Well, his mother, who wasn't quite prepared for the question, answered, "Well, darling, a stork came and left you under a gooseberry bush." The boy then went to his father and asked him, "Dad, where did you come from?" His father was equally caught unawares and replied, "Well, a stork came and left me under a gooseberry bush." The boy then went and asked his grandmother, "Granny, where did you come from?" Well, Granny didn't quite feel it was her place to explain the facts of life, so she too replied, "Well, darling, a stork came and left me under a gooseberry bush." The boy started his essay, "There has not been a natural birth in our family for at least 3 generations."
It is part of God's plan for every child to be conceived in an act of love between their parents. Further, the ideal is for every child to be born into a home where there is a relationship of committed love between their mother and father, and then to grow up living under the influence of that relationship.
Rob Parsons, director of the UK organisation Care for the Family, believes parents provide an important role model. This is what he said.
I believe that marriage can give kids an incredible foundation. You know, the scary thing about bringing up kids is not so much that they don't do what we tell them, they do so often what they see. And as they see a husband and wife forgiving each other, loving each other, sometimes even hurting each other and getting over it, kids learn deep lessons that last them a lifetime. They don't need to see a perfect marriage. They just need to see two human beings loving each other, changing, growing. And as well, saying to those kids, we love each other and we love you. What you see in us, you will see also in our relationship with you, our children.
The breakdown of marriage has an effect on the next generation. There are many wonderful single parents bringing up children on their own, doing an amazing job. But they're doing so at a disadvantage, as their children grow up without seeing the model of an intimate, committed, long-term relationship between their parents.
If you know that your fiancé is carrying pain from their childhood, it's important to allow them to express what they're feeling. And if your own parents have split up, your marriage is an opportunity to do things differently and possibly to break a cycle of failed relationships in your family or in your own life.
We'd like you to spend 5 minutes now discussing between the two of you the question in your manuals: what, in your view, is the role of marriage in society? Talk together about why you're choosing marriage rather than cohabitation. We want to go on now and look at what we mean by marriage as a covenant relationship. Almost everybody who's getting married believes that marriage is about love. But what is love? We asked people on the south coast of England what they thought.
Love, love, love.
Love, love, love.
Love, love, love. What does love mean in a marriage? What does it mean in marriage? You know what? It's a really hard question. I ain't got a clue actually.
It means caring for one another.
Putting each other's feelings first.
It means supporting one another.
Putting each other's wants and needs first.
Listening to each other.
Love, it's all down to feelings. How you feel about a person.
It's a whole thing. And I think that's why I can't define it to any one thing.
If you don't have that feeling, there's no love at all.
You've got to be with them for the rest of your life. You've got to love them.
Struggle and drive.
I think love is what you feel for someone, whatever.
I think love absolutely underpins marriage.
Love is absolutely essential to marriage.
Marriage is love.
So, the word love can have lots of meanings. There are the feelings of love over which we have little or no control. We call this type of love infatuation, which is a chemical process that, according to psychologists, can last anything from 3 minutes to 3 years. And in any marriage, these feelings will come and go.
And then there's the love that is deliberate, that's cultivated over a period of time.
A friend of ours who came on our marriage course 7 years ago wrote a letter to the press recently saying this: "What I've learned is that the roller coaster of my emotions isn't a good indicator of the health of our marriage. And winning power struggles with my wife is a pointless exercise. What works is treating our marriage as our most precious possession and investing time in it. That translates into my willingness to be wrong, to spend time doing fun things together, to listen to her when I have a lot of things to do, to help her out even when I'm busy, not to score points, not to blame her for everything that goes wrong in my life, and to wait for a good moment to discuss difficult issues. So the fact that we're more in love than ever is no accident."
We can't control infatuation, but we can nurture the other deliberate kind of love. And the covenant relationship of marriage is the setting for it.
A covenant is different to a contract. A contract is a legal document that outlines the rights and the duties of each party. A contract defines precisely the kind and the amount of service being offered by each side.
But a covenant relationship is much deeper and is based on a promise. In a covenant relationship, partners are bound together not by a set of legal requirements, but by love.
Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks commented recently on many people's perception of marriage. He said, "How devastating it is that marriage seems to have lost its power in society as a whole. A wedding ceremony is more than a formality and a piece of paper because it involves commitment, a mutual pledge of openness and trust, a promise that neither will walk away in difficult times. From that covenant of loyalty and love, new life comes into the world.
He goes on, marriage is not just living together, a temporary partnership for mutually beneficial ends. Heaven help us if that is all we see in it. It is the point at which the I of self meets the thou of another, transforming us into something larger, more spacious, more generous and tender than we could ever be on our own. In marriage at its best, you see humanity at its best.
Commitment is, as it were, the protective casing around our relationship. And the reason for that is that intimacy requires vulnerability. It's only when we're prepared to let others know what we're really like on the inside, when we're ready to talk about our hopes and fears, our dreams and disappointments, our strengths and weaknesses, that we achieve real intimacy.
And that vulnerability requires trust. We won't make ourselves vulnerable unless we trust the other person and trust that they won't use what we reveal against us.
And trust requires commitment. It's only when we know that the other person will stay with us through the highs and the lows that any relationship goes through that we're prepared to trust them.
That's what marriage is all about. Perhaps the best description of a good marriage comes in a line from Psalm 85. Love and faithfulness meet together.
A church wedding is structured around what the couple who are getting married say to each other. It's the vows, not what the priest or minister or marriage registrar says to them or over them, that makes the marriage. Because marriage is all about the commitment that you make to one another. We want you to take 10 minutes now to read through the marriage vows that you'll find in Appendix 3 in the back of your manual. And each of you decide which word or phrase or sentence is the most important for you, and then try to explain your choice to your fiancé.
We're going to speak now about what commitment means in practice.
If there was one thing we'd want you to take away from this course as an expression of your commitment to each other, it would be to set aside time on a regular basis to spend together.
Spending time together is one of those things that's an investment in a marriage, and we realised that only relatively recently we only realised what kind of impact it was having on our marriage, a very positive impact. And so really we try and spend as much of our free time together as we can now. We very rarely do anything anymore which is separate, whereas when we first got married, much of what we did was separate. And our lifestyles have both completely changed in that way, I think.
But you've instituted family days as well, haven't you? Richard, after the birth of our second child, Richard was, until then, was still pretty much spending a lot of time on his own at weekends. And I was quite panicked about having another baby, because then I'd be doubly stuck at home. And you decided to always spend Saturdays together as a family, whatever happened. So Saturday evenings we will spend together anyway, whether we're with other people or not. But during the day, we spend it together as a family. So if they go to a party, we all go to a party. You know, swimming, just whatever we do it together. And that's really helped. It's helped the boys as well.
Yeah, I think it was simply that I didn't realise that it was having such an impact on Pooh, particularly that, you know, when you're not spending time together, you really aren't living a life together. You really are living a separate existence, and it's not a marriage. And so really when we began spending a lot more time together, I think that immediately the positive effects started to show themselves. You know, we were so much more in love.
Special time with the person who matters most in our life, our husband or wife, doesn't just happen. We don't just mean being physically together in our house or flat, where one of us might be at the computer and the other is watching TV, or one making phone calls and the other paying the bills.
We're talking about making time that's different to the normal day-to-day routine. And there are two benefits of these times.
Firstly, they give regular opportunities for effective communication between us, so that we're deepening our understanding of one another. And secondly, these times keep the romance, the love and the fun alive in our marriage.
What we've found quite useful to get some sort of real quality time together is to have date nights about once a week, and to carve out a bit of time where we can just put the jobs down and say, right, sometimes it involves like just getting at the flat, because it's quite a small flat, so there's not a lot of space there, and we might just go down to the river and go for a walk, or sometimes it might involve just going to cinema where we're just being together, not really talking, but it'll basically just involve a change of the routine, and it'll be avoiding distractions, avoiding other people in terms of going out with friends, and it'll just be time for us to just do something together.
Or something that we enjoy doing, like we do enjoy dancing, so we might go dancing for an evening. But I think the best date nights are when we're actually when we can bear to stay in that house and just spend the time really talking about how we're doing, what we're feeling and thinking, not just what's been happening today, but what's really going on. And it takes a bit of time to get to the point where you draw that out of each other.
It might just be like sitting on the sofa and just, over a cup of coffee, and really just say, and asking the obvious question, how are you? How's it going?
Yeah.
What's happening for you at the moment?
Scilla and I have come to realise more clearly than anything else about our own marriage that if we're ever going to have special time together, we have to plan it and organise it in order to make it happen.
We're going to look at a few ways that we might do this. First, on a daily basis, secondly, on a weekly basis, and thirdly, on an annual basis.
First then, on a daily basis. An important part of marriage is connecting with each other every day. Some people find mornings best, maybe over breakfast, asking each other what's happening that day. Others absolutely can't cope with mornings.
That's me. Although I have to say I've got a friend who's even worse, and she has to have at least 2 cups of coffee before she can so much as say hello to her husband. So evenings are definitely the best time for her.
Some people find speaking on the phone or emailing during the day is the best way for them to stay in touch.
And if one of you has to travel with your job, making contact every day will help you to stay connected.
One of the ways Scilla and I try to stay connected is to start each day by saying a short prayer. We simply ask each other, what can I pray for you today? And that helps us to know what's uppermost in each other's minds.
What's important is to create habits that are unique to us as a couple.
Otherwise, we can easily build negative habits. We've heard many couples speak of one falling asleep in front of the TV and the other going up to bed alone, and that definitely doesn't build closeness.
The way we react to each other first thing in the morning and the atmosphere that surrounds us as we go to sleep at night are very important, and these will be affected by whether we've connected with each other during the day.
Secondly, it's helpful to plan time together on a weekly basis. Throughout the 28 years of our marriage, I think we'd say that the single most important thing we've done in terms of investing in our relationship is to have a date together once a week. We've ended up calling this our marriage time.
Sometimes we set aside an evening and we might just stay at home. But if we do, we'll make the effort to have a special meal with candles on the table, we'll put on some nice music and generally make it feel romantic. Or we may go out. At other times, we do something completely different in the middle of the day. Something that we both enjoy, like going to an art exhibition, playing tennis or going for a walk.
Those who naturally have different interests may have to work a bit harder to find an activity that they both enjoy doing together.
We discovered before we first got married that we actually were quite different from each other. And
I like doing sporty things with balls, like playing tennis and playing golf and whatever. And that is not Inger's thing.
I love taking pictures and I love climbing.
And I'm afraid of heights.
So that wasn't going to work out, and I am just dreadful when it comes to hitting balls.
So after a bit of trial and error, we found out that we both quite like swimming. So that's what we try to do once a week together.
And that works quite well. We just take this one lane in the pool, and we swim side by side, and we talk the whole way through. So that's quite good.
Having a weekly date together has stopped us taking each other and our marriage for granted.
Most couples go on dates when they're going out and then stop going on dates when they get married. Nikki and I have discovered that we can only achieve marriage time on a regular basis if we do 3 things: plan it, make it a priority and protect it.
By planning it, we mean literally putting it in our diaries like any other appointment or meeting. One of the biggest changes when we get married is the need to coordinate our diaries and to consult each other over what goes in. That may be difficult for those who've led very independent lives, but it will prevent mix-ups.
We are such independent people. I worked for years and Paul has always worked, and then we got married and, well, we lived together, and constantly we're having to work around each other. You know, it's just sometimes a complete nightmare. We've had all sorts of incidences happen, and now, although it sounds quite trivial, we actually have to have diary meetings. You know, I'm sitting there, can we do diaries tonight? Because we just mess up so many times, really, don't we? Not informing each other of things.
Yeah, diary dates have been an interesting issue to work through. We've had some, as Amanda said, incidents. I remember one night that Amanda was in the shower, I think, and I was downstairs in the study doing some stuff, and the doorbell went. And this chap was stood there, a neighbour's friend who, one of us, we still can't quite remember who, invited him round for dinner, but never put it in the diary and completely forgot about the whole thing. So this young man was stood there with a lovely bottle of red wine and some flowers and an expectant smile on his face to come for dinner. So that went quite wrong. We invited him, had a drink and a chat, and he disappeared off in his car. And actually, we've never seen him since. So the diary is quite important to get that together.
Making a date together might seem a funny thing to do. You're living in the same house and around each other all the time, but that's exactly why you need to do it.
To make sure it happens, Cilla and I take it in turns to organise what we do each week.
Making this time a priority means that this is the most important commitment to stick to every week. It's a non-negotiable. It may mean prioritising it over our work, going out with friends, playing sport, going to the gym, going shopping, or doing up the house or the garden.
It's not that those things are unimportant, but unless time together as a couple is a higher priority, it probably won't happen, or we'll cancel it.
Lastly, we need to protect this marriage time from interruptions by friends, family, neighbours, the telephone and so on. For Nikki and me, the biggest problem is the phone. So if we're at home, we put on the answering machine with the volume turned down, and if we're going out, we turn our mobile phones off.
Marriage time, when planned, prioritised and protected, will have a very positive effect on any marriage. And we want to invite you all back 2 years or so into your marriage to do another course called the Marriage Course. And amongst other benefits, doing that course will be an opportunity for you to see if you're still managing to have a regular once-a-week date night.
Hopefully by then, it will have become a weekly habit that you just can't do without.
It's really important to have regular date nights. I mean, I found without marriage, you know, it's been really important, you know, the time that you have to bond and like, just sort of take stock and get together again on the intimate level.
Yeah, I think that catching up once a week has helped us both. You know, it doesn't matter what we do, whether we go for a walk in the park or go to see a film or have a pizza. It's just, I think it's that set time every week that has made the bad times a bit better, because you might have a really bad week where you're irritated with one another or with work or whatever, and then on that one day you just know that you've got to make an effort, and it always works.
Yeah.
Thirdly, we want to look at setting aside special time on an annual basis. Each year we try to work out and plan our holidays carefully. Holidays are important for every marriage relationship. When we first got married, our attitude was, we'll just see what turns up. But after a while, we realised that we spent almost all of our holidays with friends or family and none on our own.
Holiday time is time to relax, to have fun, to do things that we both enjoy together, with no deadlines, no stress, no one else's expectations, and away from our familiar home environment.
One thing we instigated in our own marriage early on was a mini honeymoon each year. When our children were small, we'd leave them with their grandparents and go away for 2 or 3 days on our own. And these mini honeymoons can help revitalise a relationship and rekindle romance again and again.
We definitely plan an annual event. We now have 2 children, and that annual event is a no children weekend, and it's so important to us to have that time, not just to rest, but actually to invest in each other and to do fun things, you know, slightly spoily things, but actually it just takes time to reconnect on some of the bigger things. But once a year, we're so looking forward to it. We've got one coming up. And it's like a big date weekend. We would have, prior to having children, we were doing that on a monthly basis, which is a little bit easier to achieve. But now we have children, it's definitely an annual event, but actually even more special because we realise how little time we get together when we have children around.
If you look in your manual, you'll find the next exercise called Planning Time Together. We want to suggest that you spend 15 minutes discussing how and when you might spend time together investing in your marriage on a daily, a weekly and an annual basis.
Now we're going to move on and look at another aspect of commitment, the change of loyalties. Our first loyalty in marriage is to our husband or wife.
This change of loyalties has important implications in lots of areas, but particularly for how we relate to our parents-in-law, and our wider family. We've already mentioned Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. For this reason, a man and a woman will leave their father and mother and be united to their husband or wife. We want to look first at what the leaving of mother and father really means in practice.
Our situations are all different. Some of our parents are around and live nearby, while others aren't. Some have great relationships with their families, while for others it's more difficult.
Whatever our situation, when we get married, our relationship with both sets of parents must be different to the way it was as we were growing up.
There needs to be what we call a new centre of gravity in our lives. When we're young, our home is like our centre of gravity. And as we grow up, we move out in wider and wider circles of exploration and independence, learning to walk, going to school, gaining more freedom as a teenager, and eventually living away from home.
But for many, even when they leave home, the centre of gravity continues to be their parental home, emotionally and in other ways. And they may return for comfort, encouragement, money, advice, or maybe just to get their washing done.
But once we get married, this needs to change. Our marriage relationship and our marital home becomes our new centre of gravity.
The leaving is not just about the place. It's not just a question of geography. There's also a psychological and emotional leaving that needs to happen. And we mustn't underestimate what a massive change this is.
A church wedding service sometimes includes a symbolic leaving. The person who's taking the service may use the words, "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" And the father of the bride, representing both parents, gives his daughter's hand to the person taking the service, who's representing God, who then gives her hand to her husband-to-be. And that action symbolises that both man and woman must leave their parents in order that the new decision-making structure, the new home, the new centre of gravity may be created by the couple.
But this leaving can be prevented or complicated if there's interference by parents, ongoing emotional dependence by a child on a parent, or the other way round. Any of those will set up tension and problems for the future.
I didn't have a problem with parent dependence when we got married, but I had a problem with Miles's dependence on his father and his father's dependence on him, because what would happen is